When it comes to different genres of video games, I often end up playing a lot of different and unique games because I like almost every single video game genre that exists. I love the party game genre, I love 2D and 3D platformers, rhythm games, sometimes online shooters if I'm actually good at them and if it isn't Fortnite. I love open worlds and so many more. But the one genre that in my opinion sits at the top above all other video game genres are visual novels. It's horror. Enough said. But I am serious, I absolutely adore this genre. Just the concept of horror and playing to get a rush of adrenaline is awesome. And my second favorite horror game that I'm also going to talk about in this video is
Dark Deception.
Just hearing that for the first time is enough to send shivers down your spine. So why is this first of all my second favorite horror game, and what are my wishes for the upcoming final chapter of Dark Deception? Sit tight and let's roll the video. Up until making this video, a few things have been revealed about the content and size of Chapter 5 from mainly Vince, the creator of Dark Deception. PS, if you want to be kept up to date with any Dark Deception content, I would highly recommend you keeping an eye out for any new live streams from Vince on the Glowstick Entertainment channel. I think that if you're watching this video, you are at least familiar with the main story and mechanics of Dark Deception, so I won't waste your time explaining the entire story or go into any microscopic details because I am not game theory. I just want to say my opinion on this game and leave it at that. So with all of the introductions and filler stuff out of the way, let's talk about gameplay. Now, I am by no means a Pac-Man connoisseur of any kind. If anything, I desperately try to avoid it whenever I get the chance to play it. So why do I then enjoy Dark Deception's main gameplay mechanic? It's pretty simple. Setting and perspective. Because I think an unpredictable, scary environment and a thought out player perspective will make a way scarier horror game than just making a scary looking monster or character. Let me explain. Let's take one of the scariest monsters in my opinion, Agatha, and let's compare the level of horror this character brings in a dark, scary environment and in a light, non-threatening environment. So if we take a look at Agatha in her normal area with proper lighting, and if we ignore most of the level design, I think that we can all agree she looks pretty scary in the dark, because you can sometimes barely see her, especially in the second zone when the lights are dark. Now let's take the same monster and put her in a more friendly place. As you can see, not only is she less scary because of the light and warm colors, but she also just looks out of place, further proving my point that a scary setting is key in order to, in my opinion, make a scary game. And I think Dark Deception does its level design very well in terms of making this scary setting that isn't too realistic, so you don't want to move because everything just looks too real, but it's also not too unrealistic that you can just place around every single corner laughing at whatever's chasing you because it's too cartoony or just not scary. So I think it's pretty easy for you guys to figure out which zones I like and dislike in Dark Deception. Just take pretty much all of the zones that are way too lit and throw them in the bottom of the tier list. This includes the first zone of Crazy Carnival and Torment Therapy and the second zone of Barely Buried due to the zone being way too open and thus very non-threatening. But the rest of the zones in the other levels pretty much perfect this dark and unpredictable setting. Now if you have played Super Dark Deception, then you will know about the importance of perspective. In the case of Super Dark Deception, it's not only super buggy but also not very scary. And before you say the reason Super Dark Deception isn't scary is because it's pixel art third person game, I just want to ask you, have you ever played Mad Father or World of Horror? Because these pixel art games will keep you up at night. So I think the reason Super Dark Deception isn't scary and why Dark Deception is scary is because of the first person perspective. And I know Super Dark Deception is meant to be played in a third person perspective, but just imagine how much scarier it would be if you played it in a first person perspective, like Dark Deception. So the reason Dark Deception's first person perspective is scary is because of the movement speed of the player and also the monsters. But as the player you run pretty fast and you can make yourself move even faster if you use the speed boost, which means that you will sometimes move so fast around the corner that you won't be able to see the monster before it's too late, and that is scary because it's unpredictable. And this unpredictable setting, see what I did there, only really works in this first person perspective. Because if you play in a third person perspective, you have the ability to look around corners without being in much danger, unless it's a locked third person camera. I mean, just look at the original Resident Evil games and tell me if I'm wrong about them being scary. But third person horror is just not the same as first person horror, which is also why I'm happy that Dark Deception doesn't play like Super Dark Deception, except for the bugs, sometimes. Of course, I also love most of the monsters, environments, story, music and sounds, otherwise it wouldn't be my second favorite horror game ever. It's also very fun to go for the S ranks and all of the levels as an extra feat if you want to unlock everything, like me. So those are the reasons why Dark Deception is my second favorite horror game. But what about Chapter 5? Well, I think in order for Chapter 5 to be the best and the scariest chapter of Dark Deception, it needs to have unfair enemies. Okay, let me explain. Once you have all of the ring powers and know how to use them effectively, you can blaze and downright remove almost any threat in the game aside from a few special enemies. But other than that, there's almost nothing the enemies can do to you once you have these two power-ups, unless if there is an absurd amount of enemies, which doesn't always work as intended. So when I'm talking about unfair enemies, what am I actually suggesting? Well, I can tell you one thing, I am not a fan of too many enemies that are placed in a way too small area. No, what I'm talking about is unique powers for the different enemies. This could include powers such as not being able to stun a certain enemy, not being invisible to one, like the clowns in the Crazy Carnival boss fight, or my favorite one of the bunch, Lights Out. We know that the first level in Chapter 5 takes place in a mall that is most likely pretty bright. I mean, just look at the start of Torment Therapy and imagine how bright a whole mall is going to be. So imagine if at some point for a limited amount of time all of the lights just turn off, with the only light source being the light from the stores and the purple glow from the shards. That is scary to me. Sure, some people might think that this is unfair if the monsters can just chase you down in the dark, and I understand that. I just think that you have the necessary tools at your disposal that it doesn't matter that the enemies are a bit unfair or even broken at times. That's why you have these powers that are made to counter and cheat the enemies. So I think the Lights Out mechanic would not only make the mall the scariest, but also the best level when it comes to you using all of your powers to their fullest potential. Okay, that was a lot about one level without talking much about the enemies and boss fight, which I'm also excited for, but not as much as the hopefully scary environment and the story, but that's a topic for a whole other video. And just because I'm saying that I'm not excited for the new monsters doesn't mean I don't look forward to witnessing them. I mean, just look at all of the fan-made jump scares and models of the mannequin monsters people have made, and then think about what the final product will look like when Chapter 5 drops. So overall, I think the release of Chapter 5 will send Dark Deception into its best phase yet as a horror game with all of the new content we will be receiving. And I know that I have only talked about one of the 4 levels that will be in the final product, but it's simply because it's the level that we know the most about as I am making this video. But believe me when I'm saying that I have my fingers crossed for all of the levels being great and having unique mechanics that are there for the horror alone. And even if I get none of my wishes granted, I still know that I will enjoy Chapter 5 with all of the stuff that will be in it. So those are my thoughts and wishes for Chapter 5. If you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like and a sub. And if there's anything that I have missed or forgotten to talk about in this video, then please let me know down in the comments. I hope you have a nice day or night if you're watching this at like 3 AM or something. And until we meet again, bye bye!